To swirl or not to swirl? That is the question. We're settling the debate once and for all, revealing why this simple act unlocks a symphony of flavor in your bourbon. Get ready to unleash hidden aromas, tame those harsh edges, and discover a whole new dimension of bourbon enjoyment. This is the ultimate guide to swirling, and your taste buds will definitely thank you. Get ready to master the art of swirling. We're diving deep into the science behind this essential bourbon technique, revealing how it unlocks hidden aromas, enhances flavors, and transforms your tasting experience. By the end, you'll understand exactly why swirling matters and how to do it like a pro. So, you're at a bourbon tasting, surrounded by swirling glasses and intense debate. Is swirling just for show, or does it truly unlock hidden depths in your whiskey? We're putting this age-old question to rest, revealing the undeniable impact of the swirl and why it is key to maximizing your bourbon enjoyment. Welcome back, bourbon lovers, to Chasing the Unicorn, your quest for the perfect pour, where we're all about empowering you with the tools to find your ideal unicorn. I'm your host, John Schuster, and our hunt starts now. So let's talk about a little bit of aeration, right? Releasing those aromatic compounds. So one of the things about swirling is it agitates that bourbon. It exposes more of its surface area to the air. This aeration process allows those volatile compounds to escape and intensifying the aromas rising from the glass. Now, why does this really matter? It's because bourbon contains hundreds of volatile compounds. They're responsible for its rich aroma profile, and swirling makes these compounds more accessible to your nose. As an example, think about your swirling Angel's Envy port barrel finish, right? It's a bourbon that's going to amplify and have a lot of different complexities to it. And when you're swirling it, it's going to amplify those notes of ripe fruit, caramel, and maybe a little bit of that subtle port sweetness that it's finished in. And if you don't do that, it might stay muted. It might just sit in the bottom of that glass, and then you're really going to struggle to find it. But that agitation is unlocking those hidden layers, right? So bourbon is aging. Bourbon aging allows layers of flavors and aromas to develop. And swirling lightly warms the liquid and reactivates these compounds, releasing notes that don't immediately appear. Think about it, everything has its own temperature in which it starts to vaporize and things of that nature. And when you first pour it out of the bottle, it might be a little cool, so getting some air into it, warming it up a little bit, brings you a little more of those flavors that you're going to be trying to nose and enjoy. So why does it matter? Because those light compounds like fruit and floral notes evaporate very quickly, while those heavier elements like maybe the caramel and the oak mix back into the liquid, creating more depth in it. This process enhances really your ability to detect those subtleness, such as the interplay of vanilla and spice that sometimes they're hidden without that swirl. You might get the vanilla, you might get the spice, but when you swirl it, it starts to bring them both together and you can pick them out. Now, balancing these ethanol and aroma pieces really is kind of the key, right? So bourbon's ethanol, or the alcohol as we like to call it, dominates the nose immediately after pouring. Something to think about is when you put your nose right into that glass right after pouring that thing, what you're going to get is you're going to get the ethanol. And the drawback to that is you're going to burn out your nose. You don't want to do that. So swirling it accelerates that ethanol evaporation and reduces its sharpness and reveals those little bit of nuances and those aromas. Now, there are many ways to do this. I've done this in another podcast before, but let me just give you some quick tips, right? When you swirl this, swirl it and then let it sit. Let it kind of, fall back down. You can check out the legs, which is great, and you can start to see, the complexity of the bourbon through the legs and the color and those kinds of things. But it allows that ethanol to kind of go, right? But when you don't swirl this, that ethanol is going to be sitting there, and that's the thing that's just shoving its way right up to the top. And it can overpower those subtle notes like the vanilla or the spice or even the fruit. So swirling will temper this and take that alcohol and just reduce the punch from it. And it allows your senses to kind of engage with the complexities that you're going to find. So let me give you some times, right? Think about how long do I have to do this? What is the right time before I start doing X or Y? So think about this. From 0 to 5 minutes, ethanol is going to dominate that pour. But swirling will help it tone it down a little bit faster. Now, when I say swirl, I'm not talking about spin this sucker so it looks like it's the top and just keep on going and shaking the hell out of it. No, spin it a little bit. Let it just kind of evaporate out. You can tip it just a touch, and let it have its own balance. But at that 5 to 10 minute mark, the bourbon is really starting to get into its balance. It's making that optimal nosing window. It's been out, it started to warm up a little bit, and you're going to get the complexities that are really out there. Now, when you go beyond 10 minutes, what you're going to get is you're going to get some of those more heavy aromas like oak and spice. They're stabilizing, right? They'll let you really approach it, and you can get the deepness that you were looking at. And so that's after 10 minutes. Now, swirling is going to change these times, but it's not going to go from 5 minutes to 3 minutes. It's going to be more in that, hey, 0 to 5, you're going to get this, 5 to 10, you're going to get that, and over 10, you're going to get the darker, deeper flavors that are still in the glass. So when you're doing this, though, look at the visuals, right? What are you seeing? Are you seeing the swirl create those legs or tears on the glass? And if you are, so what that's telling you is the alcohol content and the viscosity. Now, viscosity is great. You're going to find that in some of your higher proof alcohols, and they're going to have, that are aged for a while. You're going to get more of the oils and things like that are in the flavor, which gives it its color, gives it its texture. You might get that creamy sensation on your palate or something like that, and that's where it's coming from. So these legs, if they're slower and thicker, they suggest that higher alcohol content or viscous mouthfeel, right? So you can really feel it in your mouth. Now, one of the things, though, is the aromatics. If you see those legs, the bourbon will continue to release those aromas, and it enhances your flavor, enhances your experience. So you're getting the aromatics that are going to come out. So some practical tips for swirling, though, let me give you this. Get yourself a tulip-shaped glass. Glencairn is most common out there, but there are things like sniffer concentrates, a variety of glasses out there. But what it does is you're looking for something that's tulip-shaped, and due to the alcohol that we're talking about, bourbon, this is one of the best ways to really look at it. We wanted to expand and then funnel it in, and part of that is the content, right? So a sniffer glass like a Glencairn makes swirling a little more effective, and avoid those wide glasses that dissipate aromatics. So don't take your rocks glass and spin it and then sniff it, because what you're doing is you're letting so much of the vapor go, and you're going to be left with a very different smell. So if you're trying to really appreciate what's out there, find yourself something that's tulip shaped and go from there. Doesn't have to be a Glencairn. There's lots of different ones out there, and we'll talk about that in another episode. But there are a lot of different glasses that you can use to really try this. But what you want to do is at this point, we're looking to enjoy all the basics of this: the aroma, the palate, the finish, everything. And that's the advantage of this glass over having maybe a rocks glass. Now, when you're swirling this, swirl it in small, controlled circles and use a gentle motion, right? You don't want it splashing and kind of throwing yourself out there. And that will help you maintain that aromatic integrity. It's not going to agitate it too much. But I do want you to do this. Do a pre-swirl sniff. Right? Now, I said that you're going to get lots of ethanol out of that, right? So smell the bourbon before swirling it to compare the evolution of the aromas. Now, what I don't want you to do is don't shove your nose all the way in and then take a big deep whiff. What you're going to get is you're going to get ethanol, and you're just going to burn out your nose. So the easiest thing to do is tip your glass about 45 degrees and just kind of waft it by your nose. Go to the left, go to the right, figure out which side is smelling better, and then get that little bit of aroma and see what you can pick up. But don't shove your nose all the way into it, because all you're going to do is just not enjoy what's coming afterwards. Now, that's your pre-swirl sniff. Check out what are those aromas. And then think about it, right? Pause after that swirl and really analyze the notes, the fruits, the spice, or the oak. Which one became more pronounced from your first sniff to your second? And then keep going, right? Because you got, 0 to 5 minutes, you're going to get one level of flavor, and at 5 to 10, you're going to be kind of in that prime category. But if you go past 10, really think about that. Are you getting lots of oak, things like that? One of my favorite things to do is as I'm using a Glencairn and I'm sniffing it and I'm enjoying my sip of my pour, and I go all the way through, when I'm all done, when it's completely empty, and it's been sitting there for a minute. Now I'm left with just the residue, right? The oils, the things that really made that bourbon great. And you get a lot of that woodsy oak feel and smell in my mind. But I love to just take the glass and sniff the glass itself to really get the things that are left over. And that is just another way to appreciate that bourbon and enjoy it. And, slows you down for drinking a little bit. But that takes us to today's perfect pour. So today I want to talk about Peerless High Rye Bourbon. Now, I've got it next to me, and it's poured in the glass here. If you're not a big high rye fan, it's still worth a shot. So let me tell you a little bit about Peerless, because it's very interesting. Peerless Distillery was founded actually in 1889, and they have a very interesting story about the founders and how they unfortunately didn't make it through Prohibition, but they really were blowing up in the idea of creating a distillery, and they had a bottling plant and a whole bunch of different things. But unfortunately, it didn't work out. But it was revived in 2015 by one of the descendants of the original founder. So Henry Craver, he is the founder or the original owner, and this family-run, not the original owner, he is the owner. And this family-run distillery really continues to embrace its heritage, which I thought was very interesting. And one of the things they do, though, is they've really innovated for the modern bourbon enthusiast. So all of their stuff, well, not all of it, but most of it is single barrels. And the advantage is kind of their process when they go through is they bottle it up into single barrel, and you get some unique, really interesting complexities through that. So they have a philosophy, and Peerless really emphasizes on that small batch production, right? And they use what's called chill filtration, and that maintains the full-bodied richness of their whiskey. So each bottle is really carefully crafted with no shortcuts, and that results in that kind of unique flavor and very authentic flavor profiles that they offer. Now, they have been recognized for their attention to detail and a very high-quality release. Peerless has become kind of a standout name in the craft bourbon world, and they often are praised for their innovative approach to rye and the bourbon expressions. And, it's funny, so when they release one, they'll put a label on it, a name or something like that. And, for instance, so this one is kind of their standard single barrel, but when you roll back on the back of it, and you won't be able to see this too well online, I don't think, but I'll come to the camera just to see if we can get it up there. But it has a little label on here, and it says Ginger Snap, single barrel selection with natural notes of molasses, burnt honey, and ginger. And so what they do is based on the flavor profile that they come out with, they slap a little label on there and they name it for something. And so this one is their Ginger Snap release of the high rye. And next high rye release will have a different label to it because it'll have a slightly different complexity to it, stuff like that. So it's really kind of cool. But this one is unfiltered, it's barrel proof, and it's offering kind of that authentic, unadulterated tasting experience, right? The high rye content really adds that layer of complexity. It's delivering some really bold spice along with the sweetness that the bourbon really brings to it. And I think it's an excellent choice for demonstrating the impact of swirling. As its evolving profile showcases how aeration can kind of unlock those nuances. So let's talk about tasting notes. Now, on the nose, this is interesting. Layers of caramel and toasted rye are accented with kind of some mint and soft vanilla, right? These aromas really kind of expand when you start swirling, and you'll get some rich complexities that start to come out. And if you're watching online, I'm swirling mine a bit just to check in a little bit more on that nose. Now, mine's been out here for a little bit, but it's still, as it goes along, I really enjoy the complexity this really gets out there. Now, I've had this one before. A little bit of sip is in here, and the creamy texture on the palate really coats that palate. It's delivering that bold rye spice, but it's got kind of that brown sugar sweetness. And what's really interesting, and I think this is a kind of a cool taste, is a little bit of citrus. When I get citrus in a bourbon, I really enjoy that. It's a different feel, different taste. But the swirling is enhancing kind of that blend of the sweetness and the spice, and it's really kind of giving you a more complex profile. And when you're just sipping something and you want to kind of get into it a little bit further, doing that swirl really can help you along. Now, I've seen a lot of people, they swirl this thing like it's a top about ready to fly off their hand, and then they sniff it and they do it again, and they sniff it and they do it again. If you're in a hurry, sure, you can agitate and you can swirl quickly and stuff like that, but if you're not, swirl it gently, right? Enjoy that thing. Let those aromas come out. Take your time. I mean, think about it. We've talked about 10 minutes, right? From the time we start till the time that it's really in its prime area. And then even after 10 minutes, you can enjoy it. So you could almost think 15 minutes to enjoy this just by swirling every so often. But let's talk about the finish. So the finish is long. It's definitely long and warm, and it leaves that lingering note of kind of peppery spice, a little bit of charred oak, and some herbal mint. And I love when I get that herbal mint out of a rye. It's not too spicy, but it's that herbal piece that really kind of gives it to you. But swirling is refining that finish, and it's bringing out the oak and the pepper so they kind of blend a little bit better with, I think, the herbal freshness of it. So instead of getting that really hard bite, you get more of a blended flavor profile as that finish. So what the swirling really is unveiled is it's softened that sharpness, right, that you would normally get, and it reduced that original rye bite. And it's really bringing up some of the sweeter notes that, a lot of us like, caramel and vanilla, and allows that to come through that rye bite that we would normally experience. So it's enhanced those herbals, that mint that I talked about. It's bringing that kind of forefront a little bit. And when I say mint, it's not like mouthwash. It's got a hint of mint, right? A little bit of herbal to it. And it's really kind of bringing out a good contrast between the bold spice, I think, and how it's coming forward. Now, it's a smoother finish. The aeration definitely smoothed out that finish, and it revealed kind of more of those layers of oak and pepper and herbal nuances, I think, and I think it blended well when you get to the finish. So I would definitely say that Peerless High Rye Bourbon definitely showed how swirling can kind of elevate the nose and change that tasting experience. And it really offered some dynamic changes, right, because of the way it is. And it helped, I think, the profile really expand itself and make it, I wouldn't say more enjoyable because I do enjoy the drink, but I think it makes it more enjoyable to find more complexity out of this. So swirling really just it's not about the flourish, right? I think it is the gateway to bourbon's really aromatic complexities. If you want to enjoy it, try aerating, right? Aerate that spirit, balances out those ethanols, and really enhances the release of the compounds. And this simple motion can really transform your nosing experience. So the next time you pour a glass, take a moment, let it aerate a little bit, swirl it, and savor the science behind that spirit. See how all these different complexities, these different volatile compounds can escape in certain ways instead of overpowering you and really burning out your nose. Let it breathe, as they say, but swirl it in order to do that. So let me give some takeaways. Swirling is going to agitate that bourbon, and it's going to release those hidden aromas and flavors. That ethanol dominance, it's going to go down. And swirling is going to help you bring some of those nuanced complexities. So sometimes when you hear somebody say, oh, it's got all of these different flavors or these different aromas, and you're going, I don't get it, try swirling. You might find that you just haven't released them in the way that you can start to pick them up. And then look at those visual cues, right? Are there legs? Are those legs offering you an idea that there's going to be some viscosity in there or some high alcohol content, things of that nature? And that'll help you understand that maybe if it's a high alcohol content, that you probably want to swirl a little more because there's more ethanol in there. So bottom line is, taste that science, test that science. Swirling in your next pour is really the way to go. Observe how those aromas evolve and share your findings with us on #ChasingTheUnicorn. Post some photos or share which bourbon revealed some surprising notes after the swirl. Tell me how you are really using this and experiencing your bourbon better. So bourbon enthusiasts, that is a wrap on this episode, and it's your turn to share your bourbon wisdom. So join the conversation on social media using #ChasingTheUnicorn and tell us about your favorite thoughts on this episode. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and you can find us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and Amazon Music. And Connect with us on social media. Just search for Chasing the Unicorn Podcast. We're all over the place. And until next time, keep chasing that unicorn. This has been a Drunken Unicorn production brought to you by the folks who love chasing that perfect pour. And maybe we get a little tipsy along the way, but until next time, sip, savor, and enjoy. Cheers.